Right, hello everybody, or should I say bonjour, and welcome to today's bike club. So we're obviously in France now, and I thought it was a good opportunity to actually discuss something that has been not playing on my mind, but it's something that's been rattling around in my head for some time. And I've got my coffee on anyway, and that's the important thing because it is very cold. I think it was 0 last night, and it's going to be a bit colder than that. But it's this, as you see in the thumbnail, it's this discussion around organised bike tours and the costs associated with that. Because in the past I've thought about doing an organised bike tour just to see how they format it and how they process what they do. Because I've been looking at this for maybe in the future, and I was looking at the costs and how much you're charged for. To do these bike tours. Now, obviously, that it's completely within your own power. You either go on these things or you don't. And I'm not going to use this to spout off about any particular companies. I was just looking at the cost in general, and is there alternatives to that? And do you think they're expensive? So, what brought us about really was when I went to Morocco earlier this year. If anybody's followed those videos on the CB500. And somebody asked me to do a debrief about the cost. How much did it cost? And that was all self-booked. I didn't have anything arranged for me. I had to do that off my own back. And I looked at the hotels and the cost of the ferries and camping sites and all that sort of stuff, which I'll go into a bit more depth later on. But I did think originally about doing it as an organised tour. So what are the benefits of an organised tour? Well, you have that. You don't have any pressure on you to worry about, finding any hotels and pickups from airports probably and that sort of stuff. You just got to get to a point, they pick you up and away you go. And everything else after that, you're given all, there's no thought required as such about the directions you're going to. For that day and where your night stop's going to be, and there's a great comfort in that, isn't there? Because I think a lot of people aren't that. They want to be adventurous, but only to a point, where they want somebody else to take the risk away, and that's completely understandable. That and it is, you're taking the risk out of it, or to a point, I suppose. But there's no worry about being sort of stranded on your own somewhere, because one, you're going to be in a group. And you've got somebody looking after you. There might be 2 or 3 people in that tour, but there is obviously some difference between the tours, and that's one of the things I want to talk about. But it's mainly the cost associated with that. I was looking in particular at the Moroccan tours. Now, Morocco is incredibly popular, isn't it? When I was out there, I saw tour after tour after tour, and bikes all over the place. Almost to a point where you think it's getting so popular that the Moroccan government might start to, not necessarily put restrictions on it, but they'll start, looking at how to control it a little bit maybe. But there's an awful lot of tours there. And some of those tours are based in Morocco in as much as the tour company is in Morocco. And you'll also have tour people and guides in that who are coming from the UK or in Europe. And they're travelling down to Morocco and they're meeting you maybe at the port at Tarifa or something like that, and then taking you across. And I think that's quite common. And I think that the tours that I looked at price-wise, which I thought seemed incredibly expensive, seemed to be that type of tour where they're people from Europe, mainland Europe, and they're taking you across into Morocco. Rather than the Moroccan-based tour companies, which seem to be much cheaper as far as I can tell. So let's look at a typical cost of a Moroccan motorbike tour. So I looked at a couple of 7-day tours in Morocco, and you think, well, 7 days, that's pretty good. You can cover quite a lot of ground in 7 days, depending on whether you're doing off-road, on-road. Now, the ones I saw predominantly tended to be on-road, maybe 85% on-road, 90% on-road. So your actual riding experience doesn't have to be too much in that respect. you're on roads, and the Moroccan roads, actually the main roads, and they're being improved daily. They really are putting money into the Moroccan roads. They're pretty safe, to be honest with you. You do get the odd iffy driver if you're going into somewhere like Morocco, into Marrakesh, and that, you've got to be very street smart, I think, or very road smart, and that certainly helps. But a 7-day tour, on average, I'm going to take an average cost now. A 7-day tour for those, you're looking at about £3,000 if you're doing it as an individual. Okay. If you're taking a pillion, then the price goes up because you're being charged for extra hotel, extra food and stuff like that. That £3,000 on average doesn't include bike hire. That's basically taking your own bike. So what do you get included for £3,000? Well, you'll get a guide, you'll get hotel accommodation every night. And the hotel accommodation is to a pretty good standard, I say. But you don't have to pay an awful lot of money to get a good hotel in Morocco, or to a good standard. You've then got a support vehicle. Now, that support vehicle was more than likely going to be carrying your luggage around for you. So you're going to be having all your luggage, the whole tour group, might be 10 or even up to 20 bikes I've seen, will all have their luggage put into a van, and then that's taken around. So you just basically got your bike and just some incidentals, water and stuff like that you're going to carry around. And I must admit, I don't know what people think about that. I like the fact that you're carrying your life with you, and I like having all the luggage on the bikes. I think it's quite nice. You're like a little self-contained unit. It's just you against the world, isn't it? A little bit. I can see my coffee boiling up, which is nice. So yes, you're going to get a support vehicle. You're going to have expert guides, in as much as they know the route, they know where you're staying. They're going to take care of all that sort of stuff. But to be honest, that's pretty much where it ends in terms of what you're getting for that money. There's no bike hire included in that. There'll probably be support for your vehicle in terms of helping you fix punctures and that sort of stuff. But bike hire tends to be, particularly from external sources rather than in Morocco, when the tours are organised external to Morocco, they don't include bike hire. So you're not really going to have an emergency bike on standby. But what you do get, obviously, with that kind of support, people are going to know where the nearest hospital is, or hopefully emergency services, how to contact people, the police and that sort of stuff. So what you're really paying for those 7 days is your food, lodging, your route, the experience of the guides, and any local administration that you might need. So £3,000 broken down over a per day cost, you're looking at about £430, give or take a pint and a pasty. That seems to me like a lot of money per day. And you got to remember, that's your own bike, your own fuel, any incidentals, coffee breaks and stuff like that. I think also drinks in the evening, that sort of stuff. Although Morocco is a dry country to the most part, but you can get beers and stuff in Morocco. So £450 a day. Now let's put that into a slight context. I know it's not like for like, but that's for 7 days. Now my trip to Morocco, North Africa, including ferries and accommodation, and also the trip from the house here in Brantôme down through Spain, all the hotels in Spain, and all the way back again, I was away for a month. Okay, I was away for a month. Now that cost me, as I worked it out then, about £2,500. Now that's pretty cheap. Now, okay, I didn't have the benefit of a guide. I was making it up as I went along. I didn't have the benefit of a support vehicle, and I had to pay for my hotels and food. Now, I think it's worth noting that food in Morocco is pretty cheap. When you're out in the sticks, unless you're in Marrakesh, let's say, but even Marrakesh you can find cheapish food. You're not paying London prices. Hotels, let's break down hotels for your £450 a day. So I looked at some of the hotels that those guys were using. I'm just going to check my. Do you think? Are you seeing the steam coming off my pot? I better pour myself a cup of coffee before I go any further. Cheers. Stay. So, yeah, hotels. So looking at the cost of hotels. So I looked at some of the hotels that are being used on some of those tours, and noted that they're ranging from between £50 and £100 a night. Now that would be available to me, say, on Booking.com. Now, obviously, what you're getting included in it is the food, but you can definitely get a really decent meal. Breakfast is normally included in those deals, but your dinner is probably going to cost something like £20, something like that. I would say maybe £25. Let's be really generous, say £30. So, you know, I think you could certainly say that night's accommodation is going to cost £100, let's say. And I think I'm being pretty generous there. Now, remember, as a tour group, you're not phoning these people up the night before and say, can you accommodate 10, 20 people? You know, these things are booked way in advance because they have to be. The hotel will need to have secure parking. Although I will say that crime in Morocco is incredibly low, and the chances of you having your bike stolen is very, very slim, to be honest with you. And that would be my experience and the research I did before I left. So, but having them in large compounds and things is great. I mean, I parked my Honda in a public car park. It was like a privately run public car park, if that makes sense. So there's a man on the gate and all the rest of it. And I slipped him a couple of quid, and he made sure the bike was looked after and all the rest of it. It was tucked out the way. Not that I had any fear that it was going to get stolen. It sat there for 4 nights, something like that. No issue at all. So the hotel's going to have good parking. The food's got to be good. The rooms have got to be to a high standard. And I think £100 is pretty much is good. So let's put that into the equation. Let's say 7 nights is going to be £700. Now, it's not going to be that to the tour operator. I would say it's probably going to be more like 500 tops, because you're doing you're doing a deal, and I think I'm still being generous there. So you're doing a deal, aren't you, with those guys? So yeah, that's when I say the hotels would cost you for 7 nights if you want to go to really good quality accommodation. So let's look at those other costs then. Could you hire a guide when you got to Morocco? Quite possibly. And I think you'd probably be looking at £100 a day. You know, you're not going to be riding all day. It depends if you're going from, doing a complete circuit, or you're going out from one place and then going out to visit somewhere and then coming back the same day. But I think this is where the group mentality comes in, isn't it? Because you've got 10 or 20 people in that thing, and then you're paying for one guide to ride with you for 7 days. So, I think even if it was a local guide and they're using a bike, I think you're looking at, let's generous £150 a day. So split over 10, 20 people, that's negligible, isn't it? And then you've got the cost of their bike and stuff on top of that. Support vehicle, again, hiring a van, the van's not going off road. That's going to stay on road. So I still think you're looking at £100 a day for a hire vehicle, again, in that group mentality type thing. So I think when you look at the overall cost of some of those tours, and you see how much one of those tours will bring in, value-wise to the company. And I would say that some of these tour companies are generally a couple of 3 guys getting together and working out a tour and taking you around and all the rest of it. They're great experience and all the rest of it. And I'm not knocking that as an operation, but I think maybe the costs are starting to spiral a little bit. And I'd love somebody to come back to me and say, well, this is how much it cost me to put that tour on. I used to do this with my training. I always had to be able to justify what I was charging, and I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that they're overcharging, but I think there is a there is this thing around how you charge people for certain works and kit and all the rest of it, that you can charge for the name, or you could, that you're adding value to it, not in its material sense, but just in, well, we're the best company, so we're going to give you, these are the people to rely on. We've got a reputation, but it's just going to cost you this. So if you think about that, say a 7-day tour with 20 people on it, that's £60,000. With 10 people on it, it's £30,000 they're bringing in. Now, obviously, you've got to pay. We hope they're paying tax on it, and they may have to pay some tax for that in Morocco, but possibly not if the company's based in Europe. So, you remember they're not paying. They're not giving you any insurance, as far as I'm aware. When you get to Morocco, in particular, you should be paying for a local insurance for your bike at the ports. Now, I did that. Now, that insurance for 30 days I had cost me €90. Sometimes in euros and sometimes it's in dirham. So that was for the night. So I paid that. Nobody else had to pay that. And the tour company doesn't pay that. You pay that locally. Because quite often you find that your insurance, particularly from the UK, doesn't cover you from Morocco. Or you need to make sure that it does. So be aware of that. Fuel-wise, fuel is about £1 a litre, I'm going to say. Just over £1 a litre in Morocco. It was when I went this year. So, I can see, when I looked at these costings and how I used to cost out stuff, I used to think, well, okay, you might be putting 30-40% on your overheads, or my cost, I'm going to put 30% on top of that, and that's a reasonable profit margin, 30%. I don't know what it is like in the tour industry or the holiday industry, maybe more than that, but even if it's 50%, I still think that's quite a lot of money. That's quite a lot of money. And I've seen the tour costs. I wouldn't even say they go down particularly the longer the tour. It seems to be a day rate, and that's what you're being charged. I have seen some of the costs for the Moroccan-based companies looking around the sort of £250 a day, and some of those included the bike. That you included your bike, the loan of a bike. On the other tours that I looked at, that I was talking at earlier, if you wanted to hire a bike, now I found this incredible. If you wanted to hire a bike for the 7 days, you were going up to about £6,000. You were looking at about £200-250 a day to hire the bike. Now, they might have been Himalayans or GSs and stuff like that, but gee, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And I wouldn't be surprised if you're paying a security deposit on that if you trash it, you could lose your deposit. So, I think it's worth, well, I'm going to say, is it worth asking the company you're doing your tours through to justify their costs of what am I getting for my £450 a day? Because in my mind, I don't think you're getting great value. But if it's something you want to do, and it's something that's, it's a once in a lifetime adventure, then fantastic, and let people take the sweat for doing that. But what is the alternative? Well, there's so much of these tours and things on YouTube that you can research these places to go. The key thing to remember is you've got to get into Morocco, and the key places to get into Morocco are Tarifa. You ride down to Tarifa, which is in Spain, and then you take the boat across, which is about, it depends on the time of year, but I want to say it was a DFDS ferry, but maybe it wasn't. It was something like that. But it's a little sort of catamaran-y type ferry, and it was about £70, I think. And that's one way. So it's about an hour and a half or something. It wasn't very long. And you can see Africa. When you're standing on the beaches at Tarifa, you can see Africa. It's not that far. And the one thing really worth remembering is that you've got to do that your immigration check. You do that on the boat, just so you don't forget that. And then you've got the cost of the insurance, which for lesser days is not so much, but I paid €90 for the 30 days because I thought I was going to need that. So that's not too bad. Hotel wise, booking.com is the way I went. So booking.com, you can look on there, put on your filters that you need parking, and you look on there, and quite often you'll look in the comments where there'll be lots of motorbike people have been there, say, oh, great for motorbikes, great for motorbikes. And that's exactly what I did, which meant that I could, screen out a lot of the stuff which was going to be no good, but also look off the beaten track a little bit. You don't have to follow the crowd. When I went to Chefchaouen, which is, a very popular first stop on the Morocco tour, the Blue City, I stayed out of the city and sort of into the mountains, which was fantastic. I looked down into the city; it was beautiful. But the bike parking was totally secure. There was nobody up there. It was just me and a few donkeys. So that's great. And your navigation, I didn't have any problem with my navigation on my phone using Google Maps or whatever, or was it on my iPhone, connected to my Aochi. I had no problem finding the places at all, to be honest with you. There are places you can go to who do a lot of stuff with the motorbike tours, but you don't have to use those. And do also remember that because there are so many tours out there now, that some of these attractions get very busy, and you have to sort of wait for, the next lot of motorbike tours to come out before you can go in there. It's a bit like that. So, do your own thing, I think is really important. Do get support if you want to. Remember, you've got a phone, and I explained this when I was doing my tour, that I've always got somebody on the end of the phone just to say, hey, I'm in trouble, or whatever, And people in Morocco are incredibly helpful. They will help. Ask for help if you haven't got it. If you come a bit unstuck. So I think you could do a really good tour if you looked at £150 a day. Even if you pushed it to £200, I don't think you're going to need that. You're not going to need it on fuel. You're not going to need it on food. It's just going to be for your accommodation. And I think £200 a day is more than adequate for doing your own tour. And remember, if you've got 2 or 3 of you that are all wanting to do the same sort of thing, then you can have a fantastic time on that money. I'm just not sure after I costed out, where the other sort of £250 is going. Well, I suppose I know where it's going. But don't be frightened of going to places like Morocco. People will tell you that, it's a dangerous place, and it's not. I'm not going to tell you not to be street smart and be, wise to things. Don't get yourself with anything you do. You tell this to your children, don't you? Don't put yourself in a dangerous position. Be street smart. Make sure you know where you are, how to get out. And that's really, really important. And it's the same as Morocco. Don't take yourself down a blind alley, but it's not dangerous. I think Morocco's pretty darn safe. There's police everywhere. Just quickly on terms of like speeding fines, I had no issues with speeding, and not that I was speeding, but I was not stopped anywhere. I think if you turn up on a bike that's got screaming exhaust on it, you're open to it, aren't you? You're asking for it. It's the same with cars. You turn up with a flash Ferrari, you're asking to be stopped. But don't stick to the rules. Be aware of your surroundings. But I think you can do a really good tour in Morocco for very little money. You're going to spend more money getting there, to be honest with you, whether you take the ferry from the UK or wherever you're coming from, mainland Europe, to get to somewhere like Bilbao or whatever it is. I went through Europe. I went through France and Spain to get there on my bike. Allow plenty of time to do that. Look on booking.com. All the parking I had in through Spain was all underground parking, totally secure. Never had any issues with my bike parking. So, yeah, what do you think about tour costs? Do you think they're getting over expensive, or do you think they're good value, or fairly indifferent? And is it putting you off doing these tours because they seem so expensive? They look expensive to me. That'd be my view on it. And so I was not going to name any tour companies, but I just think they look a little bit expensive, and I think they're so prevalent now that they're going to blow themselves out a little bit because they're so expensive. I think the market will sort of go, "Oh, that's enough of that." But what do you think? As people see that there's money to be made in doing tours, And a lot of the tours are phenomenally, you know, good. They're good, decent people charging decent amount of money, but they're giving you a decent tour, and it's a memory for a lifetime. But what you find is that you'll get some people will just start up because they see there's money to be made. They'll do it once or twice and then they'll disappear. You won't see them again. So let me know your thoughts. That's I'm trying not to be too controversial with this, but that's my thoughts on bike touring at the moment. What's been your experience, and do you think it was too expensive for what it was and it's put you off? I think that's the important thing, because if you charge the right price or a sensible price, you'll keep going back. Let me know. I'm going to finish my coffee, and then I've got to go into town and buy some more log because it's really cold again. Right, look after yourself, everybody. Thanks for watching the Bike Club, and I'll see you on Saturday, where I'm going to be doing an in-depth talk about the Meteor and how it's got here, and the little issue I had with it on the way down in Le Mans. Right, take care and ride safe, everybody. Look after yourselves.